Thanks. Oh my God. What's just come off?
What's happened?
Something's just come off. I think I broke the clapper. Oh shit. Hi guys, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Actors Waiting Room podcast. And this week we're going to be talking about day jobs. It was difficult, I'd say, planning this episode just because of just the nature around day jobs, and I find it such a tricky subject to talk about, but we're going to talk about it anyway because I think it's needed. I think there's not many, I don't know any podcast episode out there currently that I've listened to that talks specifically in detail about day jobs as an actor, or any creative, to be honest, because any creative needs a day job to basically pay the bills and stuff like that. If you are not necessarily an active creative, I don't know what that really means, but if you're not an actor or writer and you're just listening for the fun of it, a day job is essentially like a muggle job, I suppose, in like the Harry Potter world. It's like, it's the job that you don't really want to do, but it pays the bills while you pursue whatever creative career that you are going to be doing. So, and they tend to be kind of like hospitality jobs that I don't want to say don't need you to stick around, but like it's probably quite difficult to go get a high up corporate job in whatever field. Like, for example, you couldn't go be a lawyer and also try and be an actor at the same time. So they're usually jobs that are more flexible, that have sort of kind of different hours, usually late into the night, so that you can do stuff in the day. They're just the survival job, basically. But there's like a stigma, I think, around day jobs in general. Like, they're kind of looked down upon by other people because they're like, oh, well, you have to have a day job because you're not getting any acting work. And actually, having a day job is probably the most actory thing out there that you can do. Like, I can always spot an actor, like, and a creative from afar, because they're probably in a day job that they don't absolutely love, and you can just tell, like, they're not there for the like career ladder progression within that company, restaurant, bar, club, school, like whatever it is that you've chosen to go do. And also, I would say it's probably the most sort of stressful part of being an actor. I mean, there's plenty of stressful parts to being an actor, but I do think the day job provides the most challenge, just because like you're in it 90% of the time. If you're not getting regular auditions or you're not booking regular parts, which is very normal, by the way, before I carry on and people go, oh, well, I'm not getting that. That's very normal, because there are so many people within this industry, and and maybe sometimes there are just not as many auditions for yourself to be going up for. You're going to be in this day job 90% of the time, unless you have, quite a wealthy background and you're able to support yourself without those things, which, I suppose there is people out there like that, but the majority of my actor creative circle, we don't have that, and we have to have day jobs to survive. So I think, people kind of look down upon it. Maybe people who aren't in this industry look down upon day jobs because they go like, oh, so you're kind of just stuck in a bar job, or you're kind of just stuck in retail. And it's really difficult to get past the whole, I'm doing this in order to progress my creative career. But not everybody gets it. I think one of the other challenges that comes with that is that, like when people say, like, if they've met you for the first time, I feel like the most thing that people do is they go, oh, what do you do? As a creative, you just think, oh, please don't ask me that question, because you can either fake it, can't you? Like, sometimes I've been in those situations where I can't be bothered to explain that I'm an aspiring actor or whatever, and they go like, oh, so Grace, what do you do? And like, it would be so lovely to just say, oh, I'm a practicing lawyer, or oh, I work in medicine, or I work in, I don't know, like literally any other field. So you have that awkward sort of thing of going, do I tell them my day job or do I tell them that I'm an actor? And that's really difficult to sort of navigate. And sometimes, most of the time, I will just say, oh, I'm working in retail, or I'm working in this at the moment. And they go, oh, why? And then you just go, well, maybe they don't say why, but they're just like, oh, okay. And then you feel the need to feel that and to go, well, I'm doing that in order to, build my career as a creative. And the sort of confused look on their face that they give you because they don't really understand it. Or some people are like really intrigued by it and they're like, oh, what is that like? And they ask everything under the sun about it because it's probably very exciting to somebody who doesn't do that, which is, fine. But we obviously get these questions a lot, so it's difficult to navigate, I guess. I've had one instance when I was working at a theatre, and someone who I grew up with that I don't really keep in touch with anymore, but I think I've had it on 2 occasions actually, where people that I've grown up with have come to see this performance on the West End, and they've seen me working front of house at this theatre, and I used to feel so embarrassed being like, oh God, that's what they think I've done. That's what they think I've ended up doing. And like, there shouldn't be any shame in that. But they always look at you and they go, oh, Grace, I thought because like I came from a small town. They went, oh, I thought you came to London to be an actor. And you're not doing what you said that you went off to go and do. And so it's just really tricky. And also you don't really have the time, nor do you really want to explain the full ins and outs of why you're doing this job and trying to become an actor at the same time. So totally get it. I don't know if anyone else has had that awkward run in. And I remember speaking to like this lady actually who worked front of house with me, and she was a bit older and wasn't a creative, but just needed this to be part-time while she was raising her children. And she just said to me, goes, oh, like it really shouldn't matter what they think, because they have no idea the full scope of like what you do and your whole life story, and neither do you. You can't just judge someone off like a quick snapshot of like where you see them, because there could be so many other circumstances around that. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I do get that. And that kind of made it a bit better. I think if you phrase it in the sense of they don't know my whole story and I don't know their whole story, so we'll just leave it at that, and maybe that will provide a little bit of comfort. And I think it's the same when people ask what you do, they're never going to understand it. And so the need to prove and give an insight into what you do to being a creative every day to someone who doesn't do it and has never had a foot in that industry or field at all, they're never going to get it. So sometimes I just let them think what they think. When you get I've had so really like awkward conversations where people are like, oh really, so what are you going to do if it doesn't work out? And I'm like, yeah, I suppose I'll have to think again. Do you know what I mean? And I just think just trying to hold that side of yourself and just knowing that they're not going to fully understand what you're doing, and you're probably not going to fully understand what other people are doing either, but that's actually fine. And you don't need to take their concerns, I think, on, because everyone has those concerns where they think, oh, someone else doesn't think that what I'm doing is a good idea. Should I think that this isn't a good idea? And actually, you can't think like that, like ever, because you just can't. I don't think you can compare anyone else's situation to your own. And if it's something that you really want to do, then you should go ahead and do it. But anyway, we're supposed to talk about day jobs. So I've got just a little bit off track there. I have probably had every day job you could think of under the sun, bar teaching. So I have done, when I first graduated at like 22, what did I do? Oh, I worked in a bar full time. Hated it. I think I used to work like 56 hours, just was not doable. And the rules and regulations of that place where I worked was just not healthy at all. I was exhausted every single time I came home and never did any acting work. And I did that only for I used to work there like at the weekends while I studied, while I was at drama school. And then I sort of carried it on into the summer, maybe for about 6 months. And I just realized, no, we can't be doing that. Then I went into retail. Retail was a bit better. I think if you can find, retail is not too bad, I don't think. Like the hours are much better. It is still very physical. And I think when choosing a day job, maybe try not to think of something as so physically demanding, just because it's really exhausting. And like on your days off, you end up just kind of just crashing because your like body actually aches from either like lifting stuff, being on your feet 24/7, and just moving around a lot. And I think that's going to not be such the best. I don't think that's the best thing to do when you're already striving for such an active career where you have to be here, there, and everywhere. But that's up to you. But I would say retail is probably better than hospitality. I think it depends on obviously purely on what you enjoy. What else have I done? I've done theatre work, front of housing. I've also been on like the merch table sides of things. Like I used to work for a company called Playbill that used to do the merchandise for, where was it? Oh, used to be at like Harry Potter, Moulin Rouge. I think that's it. And currently at the moment I'm admin and I'm very lucky to work from home. So that does help a lot with that side of things. So yeah, I've done everything you can think of. And hopefully I'm going to try and give you some tips on what you want to aim for. I think the whole thing about the day job thing is that you have to be happy with it. Because I remember thinking back to it, thinking back probably like maybe 2 years ago, I thought that the day job just had to be anything to just make sure that you pay your bills and it didn't really matter about your happiness. But actually coming back to that, I think it does. I think you do have to kind of enjoy it to some extent. I don't think it has to be the job that's going to like, you know, make you excited to go there every single day. I don't mean that. But I think it does have to not fulfill you, that's not the right word, but I think it has to not drag the living soul out of you. And I think I found when I worked for front of house, I found like kind of like an artistic community that I could relate to. And it was really supportive and it was nice to be with people that were doing the same thing. And sometimes you can find that in pubs, bars, you know, restaurants, wherever, in hospitality. But I found that working in front of house was actually quite an okay deal, just because it wasn't too physically demanding. I got to watch a lot of like performances that were great, and I got to learn from a lot of different actors that came in doing the same part, but over a long period of time. And like I said, I got to make like sort of like an artistic community, and it was quite fun and stuff like that. And only recently have I sort of come back to admin work just because of, I don't know, I think it suits me better. The other thing about the day job is that it's supposed to be able to provide you with the necessities that you need for life. And I mean food, I mean looking after yourself. Like, you know, there are lots of jobs out there that you get paid basically little to no money for these very, they say, flexible jobs, and you're not actually looking after yourself very well. And I think from anything, the better you look after yourself, the better also your acting career or creative career will be, because you won't be so exhausted, you won't be trying to prove anything, and it just helps you come across as kind of just a bit more of a collected person. I think sometimes we can get into this sort of, and it's easily done, particularly like in London where rent is extortionate and, you know, you're working these not very high paid jobs or minimum wage jobs because you think that it's flexible enough for you to leave whenever you need to for an acting job. But like sometimes it just doesn't always work that way. And I think you need to be able to look after yourself. And so maybe weighing up how much you're going to get from a certain job like needs to be a priority, I think, because you need to be able to look after yourself. And the last thing I'll say on this before I go into my little rule book of day jobs is that you already have the title as being an actor. Just because you're in this day job 90% of the time, that doesn't mean that you aren't an actor or you aren't a creative writer, director, whatever you are pursuing. Does not mean that that's not what you are and what you're striving to be, or you just are. Like, I don't even think you can say striving to be, because you are that. Like, the whole reason why you're doing this day job is to support your other passion and your main career goal. So don't let anybody say to you that you're not an actor, or you're not a director, or you're not a writer. You don't have to earn it. You have probably already trained for it. You've probably done other jobs. You probably kind of know what you're doing. You've developed those skill sets. Just because you're now going to pour someone a pint for £8, which is extortionate in London, doesn't mean that you aren't that thing. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Anyway. Okay, so I have come up with a list of rules that you can apply to when looking for a certain day job. And then at the end of it, I will give you some ideas about what type of day job would be good with pros and cons. So The first rule about day jobbing is, sounds a bit like Fight Club. Anyway, the first rule of day jobbing is, what have I put? Your day job has to work for you and not against you. So it has to work for you and not against you. So you need to pick a job that is not going to physically exhaust you in any possible way. Like, some people actually get like back injuries from deliveries. You've got to think about these things. And also, you're exhausted on your days off because you're, like you said, back aches, arm aches, legs ache because you've been standing for 8+ hours. Like, yes, that is a thing. And the break system is really dodgy and you don't get many breaks at all, particularly if you work in hospitality. I remember working if I worked like a 12-hour shift, I used to work 12-hour shifts, they would make me have my break like 4 hours into my shift, because it would mean that they needed to have me for the whole of the dinner service and to the end of like closing down the bar or closing down the restaurant. So be mindful about what physical demands and kind of mental demands that this job will require of you. So it's got to work for you and not against you. Second one, work smarter and not harder. So the first thing that I did when I first started looking at day jobs is that I just grabbed the first thing that would have me. Not the best way to go. And also, I wouldn't evaluate like the costs of things like travel, eating out every day. So like certain jobs used to cross over into meal times, and if I didn't like meal prep enough, I would then be buying food out. I would also be paying quite a lot of travel to get there and back. And actually, because you're working like minimum wage or London living, it might not actually be worth it. So be a little bit smarter about where you're going to work, and don't just jump and run to it just because it says that it's flexible or that it's on a 0-hour contract. I just think you have to weigh up all the pros and cons of this. Like, you've got your physical demands, but you've also got like the cost of things. And if you're living in London, the costs really do add up. Like, even going to get meal deals every day, like that's at least £5 for lunch or £5 for dinner. And I know some people listening might be like, that's kind of like nothing, but to a struggling artist, like, £5 a day just on food, 7 days a week, that's quite a lot. And so, if you're having a job that runs late into the night and that you can't meal prep for, you've got to weigh in those costs as well. Like, I remember when I used to work in theatres and I would get home at like probably midnight, maybe sometimes. You're too tired to really like meal prep, and then you sleep in, and then you don't meal prep in the morning, and then you're kind of in this like vicious cycle because you're so tired, and then you just keep buying food out. And actually, I don't want to sound like an old fart, but like, just be aware of like how much things realistically are going to cost you in comparison to what the job is going to pay you. The next rule is use your skill set to make yourself a day job. Your day job does not have to be hospitality, retail, front of housing, teaching, whatever it is. You could actually build yourself your own little side business. I have met so many people recently that either do acting coaching or they do personal training. Like, if you're trained in that area, like, so many people have different skill sets. Like, maybe they didn't just train like at drama school, maybe they've got like a nutrition background, or maybe, like you said, they've got like a personal training background. You can also pay for yourself to go on these courses. They are quite expensive, but that just means that you get to kind of work for yourself and set your own schedules. So have a look at your skill set and see what you can offer. You've been trained in acting. Why can't you, set up businesses like voiceover businesses, like, helping people to record their own voiceover, selecting material, audition prep workshops. Like, can you do any workshops? Like, think of it that way as well. Like, try and be creative, I suppose, in what you actually can do, and see if you can actually build a day job around that. And then that means that you don't have to go and work for these other establishments that maybe you don't really want to. The next rule is contracts. Contracts is a huge thing when we talk about day jobbing. Everyone thinks that you need a 0-hour contract purely because of how flexible it is. I agree. I have been on 0-hour contracts, I've been on fixed term contracts, and I've also been on permanent contracts. I think I'm on a permanent contract right now in my admin job. This gets lost in translation. I think be realistic about where you are in your career and how often you actually get auditions and how often you are working. Just because if you're one of those people that's like really in and out and you're really busy, 0-hour contracts might be the way to go for you. But if you're one of those people that possibly gets an audition like every other month or maybe every 3 months, sometimes every 6 months, assess what you need and don't hold on and suffer just because you think a job might crop up. And I know that's such a weird thing to say because everyone goes, you need a flexible job to be able to just drop everything and go to auditions. I mean, not that everybody loves self-tapes, but one of the things about self-tapes is that we don't have to basically run off to auditions as much anymore. I mean, I think that's quite a nice thing. Being able to like plan out when you can do things and do it kind of on your own schedule when you get given 3 days, 2 days, whatever. It's very rare these days that the timeline for things are really that fast around. For argument's sake, yes, there are a few productions or there are a few cases where things have a very quick turnaround. Commercials are very quick, but the great thing about commercials is that you don't really have many lines, and it's kind of usually about like either dancing or moving about, depending on whatever the commercial is like basically asking of you. I just think assess where you are at the moment and don't suffer on low paid jobs, 0-hour jobs because 0-hour jobs is great, but they can soon drop you if they don't want you to work. Like if they just go, oh, we don't need you today, they don't have to pay you for that. You also don't get sick pay. These are the things that you need to kind of think about and be ready for, I think. Like I have been so poorly with the flu and I've forced myself in because I don't get sick pay on 0-hour contracts. 0-hour contracts are only great when they work for you, but also the employer can be quite crafty, I'd say, with a 0-hour contract. If you are going to go for the 0-hour contract, I recommend having two part-time 0-hour contracts. That was always the best thing for me when I did that, just because when one piece of one company or whatever goes, oh, we don't need you that much this week, Grace, you can go to the other one. And I know everyone's going to be a bit worried about the tax system and stuff like that, but if you ring HMRC, you can tell them exactly what hours you do at one job and the other job, and it will just figure itself out. It does make your work life a little bit more varied, having 2 different workplaces, so you don't feel like you're too stuck in one. I have found that. So, if you're going to go for the 0-hour contract, I really do think having multiple 0-hour contracts is beneficial, just so that you're not shortchanged if anything comes up and happens and whatever. Fixed term contracts, I think, are excellent. They are like a happy little medium. You are only there for a certain amount of time, particularly for admin jobs. There's a lot of fixed term contracts out there. There's a lot of agencies that literally just put you in a job for maybe a week if you're covering, or 3 months, or you can hop around from job to job doing admin work for fixed term contracts, and it's really not that bad. And they give you sick pay. That's a big thing, very, very big thing. Permanent contracts, again, I'm on a permanent contract at the moment. For me, it's not a massive worry at the moment, just purely because my audition schedule is not crazy at the moment. So I just take it as it comes. I think putting yourself and putting your life on hold, waiting for something, waiting for an audition or waiting for a certain part of yours to come about again, I think you've got to look after yourself and you've got to look after your well-being a little bit more. You can't put your life on hold just because you think a job might come your way. I think that's such valuable advice, and that was something that someone told me once, and I was like, really? And I was like, yeah, you can't put your whole life on hold. You can't sacrifice your finances and stuff like that. You can't sacrifice your well-being because you're waiting for a part. And that's essentially what you're doing when you go to these jobs and you're like, oh, I might only be here for 2 months because I'll get picked up or I'll do this or whatever. And if that happens to you, that's fantastic. But you have to really assess your own situation before you start sacrificing other parts of your life, if that makes sense. Another piece of advice about day job is be friends with your boss. Be really good friends with your boss. Because whether you can, there'll be two, you have to assess your own situation. You can either tell your boss straight up front that you're an actor, and in most industries like front of housing, bar work, retail, they'll be absolutely fine because the majority of their workforce probably will be actors. If you're working in more of a corporate setting, you can decide whether you want to delve into that information or not. And I think you will be able to tell if it's the type of place that you can say, oh, actually, I'm an actor and that's what I'll be doing first. You know, you have to navigate that kind of yourself. But the number one rule, I think, in any situation is be really good friends with your boss. And I don't mean like best friend, gal pals. I just mean make sure that when you go to work, you're doing the job. You're not being, like you're not giving attitude, you're not going to work, especially in a workplace that you don't particularly like. It's really hard. But I think if you work hard at your job and you make your boss happy, when these things come up like, oh, I've got a last minute audition, can you help me out? They're more likely to say yes. And you're less likely to have to lie to them, call in sick or whatever, you know, we all do when we need last minute time off. You will be able to do that without this constant fear of like, oh God, what am I going to do when I have to leave this job? Or what am I going to do when I have to go for an audition? Because that brings you anxiety as well. Like whether you believe it or not, like you don't want to let someone down, and that causes stress as well. And that causes like kind of a bit of an unhappiness with you because you're stressed that you might have to say, oh, I'm really sorry. But I think if you're on good terms with your boss, if you work hard at your job, maybe you can't get something covered, you know, that would be the perfect time to go to your boss and say, I'm really sorry, but I really need this off for an audition. They're most likely to say yes. Like I actually had a boss like that once where he was like, yeah, Grace, that's fine. I'll just cover you for a couple of hours if you can come in, you know, later on or whatever, like whatever it was. They can always work around it if they like you. So that's a big, big one. My last little tip on this is that, and I've touched on it earlier, is I think you have to enjoy the job to a certain level. It doesn't have to be an amazing level, but it does have to provide you with a bit of happiness, because day jobs are hard. They're really hard because you kind of feel a bit like, I always feel a little bit like like an imposter, because I'm working in a place that it's great, but it's not my main career goal. And so you've got other people around you where they do want to progress in this industry or career, whatever that you are in, and they care passionately about it. So you kind of feel a little bit like an imposter because you're going, this is literally just to pay my bills. But I think if you can try and enjoy your job a little bit better, I think it will bring you, one, some financial stability, and two, just it will help your mental well-being so much more, because getting rejected and being in this industry, as wonderful as it can be at times, is hard. And so if you have a day job that makes you equally as unhappy, that builds quite like a hard life for you. And I don't think you want that. And I don't want that for anybody. When I see like other actors that are like, I'm just so down and miserable at the moment and I hate my day job, try and do something a little bit for yourself and just, try and find a job that you can kind of enjoy just for the little bit. Even if it means you have to change a couple of jobs a couple of times, it's okay. It's not your main like career goal. So I've mentioned before like what other jobs I've done. I think teaching, like you can work for teaching agencies. I think that's kind of a good one. You can work for these immersive experiences, but again, be a little bit careful about like how much it's using you physically. Again, front of housing, I would say, is a very good option. I would say, I don't know if it's still about, but there was a place called Office Angels that provided fixed term contracts and temporary work. You can go on their agency list as a 0-hour contract as well, and they will just send you out to offices where you can work as a receptionist or lots of different admin assistant jobs, basically all across London. Arts jobs, like the website Arts Jobs, I think is where I found my most successful day jobs. There is a huge variety on there where you can do things as much as like you go work in a photography studio, you can go work in art galleries. There's lots of variety on there. And also it's not just London for Arts Jobs, the website. You can, I think there's most places in there like across the UK, but I would suggest going to look on Arts Jobs if you don't know what that is. So I hope this episode has given you a little bit to think about in terms of how to tackle day jobs. Hang in there, they're really hard, and I hope that you won't be in your day job for too long. I hope that you're going to go off onto a nice acting job or directing job, writing job, whatever it is that you want to go and do. But I hope it provides you with a little bit of food for thought on just the whole day jobbing thing, because it is it's one of the hardest things to navigate for sure. Thanks guys, and I will see you in the next episode.